Welcome everyone to the Resiliency with Veeam Recovery Orchestrator webinar. Just a few housekeeping items to kick us off. I want to make sure and let everyone know that your mics are going to be muted throughout this webinar. Also, the Q&A, use that up in the upper right-hand corner of the webinar. If any questions come up throughout the webinar, please feel free to ask those. We'll answer those as we continue throughout the webinar. Myself, I'm Jason Trier. I'm a senior customer onboarding engineer and America team lead. And then we have Gregory Barney on here with us as well. And he's a customer success engineer. We're going to go ahead and get kicked off. So diving right in, we're going to look at the Veeam data platform. A lot of information on this page. We've got right in the center, take a look. We got secure foundation, cyber resilience, and enterprise resilience on that right-hand side. So what we're looking at here is just a difference of licensing model with the platform. The main foundation, you get backup and recovery. The cyber resilience is advanced licensing, and then premium licensing there. As we fill this out, you're going to see as you kind of go to the right-hand side, obviously you're going to get some more features. You're going to get AI guidance. You're going to get detect and identify threats, secure and observability. Really what we're here talking about today is that orchestration and compliance piece. Diving in, what is Veeam Recovery Orchestrator? At the high level, it serves a couple purposes. It's really great for compliance, validating those RTO and RPOs. We'll get some reports that help you validate and ensure that you're meeting those compliances. We have clean recovery on that right-hand side. Again, this is going to be for ensuring that your data is clean, that you can recover from it, that you've done the testing, that we can do the bubble testing, ensure everything's good to go for that time that you may have to find yourself in that disaster recovery scenario. Dynamic documentation, automatic updated reports and audits. These things are great for compliance. These things are also great for executive leadership as you're working with the product. Anything that you do in the product, any recovery plans, anything that we build for orchestration, we're going to have reporting on that. We're going to be able to do some auditing on that information as well. As we look at recovery to the cloud, here on that right-hand side, this is just pointing out that we do leverage and have compatibility with Microsoft Azure. We can take your data from on-prem and we can recover that into Azure. You may have an Azure landing zone today, so we can work with that and bring your data back over there during a DR event. If you don't have Microsoft Azure, maybe that's something that you might look to in the future. Now, as we go down to the supported platforms and applications at the bottom here, we're really just pointing out the different platforms that we work with. On the left-hand side, we have Azure, vSphere, and Hyper-V. These are the main products that we work with today. I know you probably got questions. What about Nutanix? What about Proxmox? Note that those are often, those are questions that are asked very often. Note that those are on the roadmap as well. But I couldn't give you a time on those. We also have integration with Veeam agents. So as you're working with your Veeam backup and replication product, as you're protecting that data in your environment, just note that everything you see here, we can leverage with Orchestrator. The apps, Exchange, SQL, SharePoint, for doing application aware. We have more granular control for orchestration and recovery there. If you're leveraging one of the 3 storage providers as your production storage, NetApp, HPE, Lenovo. And what we're saying here is we can orchestrate from your production level replication. So if your replication data source runs from a production to a DR location, we 100% can integrate with that in the product. Now, note custom scripting here. This is something that's used pretty widely. You've got specific use cases for your business. You may need something that needs to get scripted inside the guest operating system at the time that it recovers into a DR location. Just note that is a capability in the product. Taking a look at core architecture here, one of the things that we're looking at with Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, and I'm going to note that you might often hear us refer to this as VRO. It's just a thing that we use, it's just a term that we use for this product and shorten it up, and so we leverage it quite a bit. Now on that right-hand side, you're going to see Veeam Orchestrator Server there. Obviously, that's just the main application. There's a the service, and as well as the web UI that gets us access to managing that platform. And then we have Veeam Backup and Replication. Now, note you already got a Veeam Backup and Replication server probably in your environment today. You may have more than one. This is just an embedded product that we can leverage, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the webinar, maybe what some purposes are for that. We also use Veeam One. Again, you may have this in your environment today. This is going to be a lightweight variant of that product. We're going to leverage that for pulling data about your infrastructure as well as your Veeam infrastructure to pull data into Veeam Recovery Orchestrator so we can leverage it. So just note that that's what that purpose for. It's not going to be to replace Veeam One in your environment today. Now, just to point out here, independently, these products, some of them support Postgres, but currently today, as we do deployment of Veeam Recovery Orchestrator with V13, Microsoft SQL database is required, and having a separate server that manages that SQL database, standard for enterprise, is going to be the best practice requirement there. Now, when we take a look at sizing of this server, a lot of people fall into that 1 to 1500. So on the left-hand side, we see CPU anywhere from 4 core to 8 core. If you have enough compute availability in the environment, obviously I would always recommend to shoot more for the 8 core. You can scale that as you go if need be, if performance becomes a hindrance or if you're seeing something there. Now for memory, 12 gigs for the orchestration server, 8 gigs for Microsoft SQL. And as we mentioned, earlier, we want to use that separate SQL server if possible. If you use a SQL box or a SQL instance on the standalone Veeam Recovery Orchestrator server, just note that you're going to have to give it more compute than you would if it was just acting as the application front end. So orchestration scenarios. This has taken us back into really some high-level overviews of how we leverage some of the data protection in Veeam Backup and Replication. And we're looking at this at what are we doing with the data from a common scenario when we're going from production to DR? Where are our management servers sitting, right? As you can see here, Veeam Backup and Replication is sitting on that right-hand side. We've got Veeam Recovery Orchestrator also sitting there. Now, this is going to be best practice placement for this product. Veeam Recovery Orchestrator needs access to Veeam Backup and Replication during an orchestration event. So if your Veeam Backup and Replication server is sitting on that production side, if that production side goes down, it has a power outage, it has, a catastrophic event, the first RTO for your orchestration of your data is going to be recovering Veeam Backup and Replication. So you really want to make sure that this is available in the environment. That way, you're not having to recover. You're not having to spend the half hour to an hour pulling that, doing a restore of that database. Note you could restore it back into Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. Because that does have an embedded instance there, we generally recommend that it is a separate instance. You could have a cold server sitting at DR site, but note that cold server may need to be updated, to the latest version if you're not keeping it up to date. So there's just a lot of things in the mix where Generally, Veeam backup and replication sitting at that DR site is the best strategy. The one caveat to that, obviously, is you're going to be able to, when you take a look at having VBR at that site, if that connection goes down between DR and prod, because you've got your data movement components such as your proxies and your repositories and gateways at that production site, you may not be able to back up that data because Veeam backup and replication cannot talk to those assets. So something to consider. Now, this is just showing you a orchestration of VM failover. Got a few hosts on that left-hand side. We're managing it with Veeam backup and replication. The data is flowing, and this is kind of showing a very simple model. Simple deployment, like maybe Veeam backup and replication just acting as like your all-in-one component, and you're doing a replication to the DR side at that ESXi host, and Veeam Recovery Orchestrator is connected into that production Veeam backup and replication instance, and we're managing the orchestration commands and the data here for that failover. VM failed back. So if that production site comes back up, it was a power outage, it was something that wasn't too long term. Pretty simple. Again, we're just leveraging common technology that's baked into Veeam backup and replication here. And we're going to say, hey, we want to take that data that's been running in that DR site and we want to bring it back. We want to fail it back. Storage and VM failover. Now, this is just going to be a mention to the HPE, the NetApp integrations that we have for storage integration overlay for storage snapshot replication and then failover here. So what we're depicting on that left-hand side is obviously we've got some data stores over there on that left-hand side on the side A. We've got that storage array. We're going to have some API integrations that we're going to be able to send those commandlets to allow us to do the recovery of the volumes from site A to site B. Obviously, the replication, the data is already there, but it's just that orchestration command of bringing those volumes back online. So orchestrating restore to VMware vSphere. And what we're looking at here is the backups. We're looking at taking backups at that prod site, doing a backup copy of these over at DR. Note this could be, it's not shown here, but this could potentially be, the cloud site. Maybe the data is sitting out in Veeam Vault and you want to pull the data back to a DR site, right? Maybe you have that type of connectivity. So that is something that we can definitely do with this product. And this is just showing that orchestration, showing all of the components that are in the mix here for making that work. We've got a backup copy of that data at DR. And Veeam Recovery Orchestrator is simply saying, hey, I know where that data is at based on having connectivity to Veeam Backup and Replication. Veeam Backup and Replication houses all of the information about the policies, the proxies, the repositories, where the data sits, and how to rehydrate that data. And so orchestrators are simply just leveraging commands and telling Veeam Backup and Replication to do what it needs to do. Now, of course, as you look at Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, you're going to be grouping what you want to recover, right, into recovery plans. And that's something that Barney will cover a little bit later. Orchestrating restore to Microsoft Azure. This one is, you can do this a couple different ways. So obviously mentioned we've got prod, we've got DR to Azure. One of the things that isn't really necessarily depicted here, but what we do see is we are potentially taking data object storage. Maybe that object storage is sitting in production. Note, we're going to want that secondary copy of the data sitting in Azure. If it's sitting in Veeam Vault or it's sitting in an Azure storage blob, that is going to be the most recommended path for recovery to Azure because the data is sitting there locally. Another infrastructural kind of architectural key point here that's not depicted is that you're actually going to deploy Azure proxies in Azure. And those Azure proxies will then be able to pull data out of that object storage, out of your Azure storage, or Azure blob rather, and that container. It's going to be able to rehydrate that data, reformulate it into those VM files that it needs for Azure, those managed disks that it needs to present that and power those VMs back online. Restore to Azure Local, previously Azure HTI Stack. This is also a capability in the product, and we're saying, hey, we could take things from, say, maybe a VMware environment, we can take that over to a DR site that's sitting in Azure Local. So this is going to be one of the more complex explanations about the product, but Data Labs is a component of the product, and some of you may have used virtual labs or Sure Backup within Veeam Backup and Replication. This is really just an extension of that. That's bringing that Sure Backup and that virtual lab configuration into expanding it into Veeam Recovery Orchestrator as a data lab. And this is going to allow us to do the bubble testing that we'd like to do with anything that maybe we are orchestrating with. As I mentioned, recovery plans, we're creating recovery plans that are going to inventory and house all of those VMs that we may be wanting to recover from backup or maybe wanting to recover from replication. We could set that to be tested in a data lab. I mean, there's so many reasons why we want to definitely do that. It allows you to validate, spin up time of VMs. It allows you to validate getting those VMs online, do some scanning against them. It allows you to verify that those machines can talk to each other, potentially in that new subnet that we're looking to isolate, as well as kind of mimic. So that is a great use case. What we're talking about specifically here is that replica verification. And there's some different networking modeling that we can do, or feature sets that we can do with the product. What we're looking at here on that left-hand side is we're just simply saying, hey, we've got a production host. We're doing a replication from prod to the DR data lab. And we are essentially have a host on that right-hand side where the data is being replicated to. And then we're leveraging a virtual lab to create an isolated network. And as we go down, you can see on that right-hand side on the data lab, we've got purple text, we've got the green text there. And really what we're indicating is just differences of networking there, where we've got in green, that's the production, right? We've got the DR ESXi02, we've got the DR vSwitch and the DR port group. And then we're actually creating in purple an isolated network for that replica machine to be powered on in. So it's not going to be able to talk to anything else. It's truly isolated. That virtual app is going to be the one that communicates between, as you can see, as we follow that line up from VLab, that virtual lab is going to communicate to all of the production Veeam components. But it also is going to sit 1 foot in each. It's going to sit on the fence between production on that green side and then 1 foot on that purple side. And that's what's going to be able to allow VM01, or maybe we bring several VMs back into this data lab in this isolated network. They're going to be able to talk to each other without talking to production, but VLab allows that kind of firewall type routing to act as a mitigator between the two networks. So taking a look at clean room here, as I can get it to progress. VRO detects if a remote agent on the VBR cannot be reached. I'm going to go ahead and just fill this out. So we talked a little bit about data labs, and I want to talk about kind of some key differences with what clean room is. Now, with clean room, we're actually utilizing some custom scripting to detect if a remote agent on VBR cannot be reached. When that is not reachable, if the VRO agent is offline, then by default the embedded VBR is checked for the required restore points. So it's going to take a look. Hey, that agent's offline. I can't talk to that VBR server. Then it's going to check to see if the required restore points are available. And then it uses a pre-planned script in the recovery plan to allow us to check that data, attach the repository, pull the data back in, and do a recovery of that data. And the clean room perspective, as we kind of dive in here, this is kind of what it looks like. Very high level. We're not going to dive into a bunch of detail here. But the clean room is more of a, we're actually going to test, like maybe we've got a full prod, we've got a clean room, we've got dedicated EA6i hosts, or maybe even DR that's completely passive, that's sitting over there and that's available to us to do clean room type testing. We want to take control of a copy of the data that we have, a backup repository local onto that clean room side, that potential DR side. Could be at a headquarters. I mean, it just needs to be available infrastructure, and it's going to take advantage of that backup repository data, and it's going to then do a clean room recovery with the backup data. So that's why here on that left hand side, maybe we're going to schedule a connection disconnect between that prod and that clean room to isolate it to allow for that that testing. So what I'd like to do now is I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to Gregory Barney. He's going to take over, talk about some of the new features with V13, and then he's going to dive into a demo a little bit later with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. Let me just go ahead and share my screen here. All right. So yeah, some great new features here in version 13 of Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. Down at the very bottom of this page, if you notice here, with V13 for Veeam Data Platform, we've also raised the version number up on Vero to align with our other products. So it's a little easier to determine that everything's kind of on the same level. But here at the top here, we've added software appliance support. So that great new V13 feature that we've added for software appliances, including the HA clusters, are now supported in Vero. We have a brand new web UI, which we're going to dive into on the demo. I've probably seen it here on some of the slides that Jason has gone over. And that UI plugs and plays into all the other kind of webhooks and APIs that our other products offer, such as VBR and Veeam. New audit reports, so we'll be diving into that on the demo as well, where you can see recovery plan activity, change tracking. We also have some new offline malware scans, which we'll touch on as well. You can do YARA rules. You can even reach out and touch that restored virtual machine, for example, and run antivirus on it for the installed antivirus that you have. And we also have some failover vSphere data store support for VMs that are backed by Electra MPB 10,000. So moving on here, one great new feature, which is part of that new web UI, is multi-factor authentication, which you can enable and disable globally. It's enforced just for your UI login. It's not enforced for plan executions, so you'll see that on the demo when we're looking at plans. If you were to run a plan, you don't have to use MFA. And then inside of the roles section of the settings inside of Recovery Orchestrator, you can see all the status for MFA for all of your users, and you can also reset MFA for any users. Touching on the Veeam software appliance support, here under the infrastructure tab under Veeam Data Platform, you're able to deploy agents, and you can add the Veeam software appliance cluster to Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. You can just use the IP address or the cluster name, and the Vero agent is automatically going to deploy to those nodes. touching on some more of the new Azure stuff here. We can connect directly to Azure local clusters or via SCVMM. We could do direct cluster connection, so that's now also supported for our Hyper-V workloads. And Orchestrator can also treat Azure local the same way as Hyper-V, the same way that your VDR does. And then this here is our recovery orchestrator matrix for compatibility. So simple from and to column there. So your VMware backups can be restored to all Microsoft platforms, on-prem hypervisors and Azure. Microsoft on-prem VM backups can be restored to both Microsoft's on-prem hypervisors, and agent backups can be restored to vCenter and Azure. And these slides will also be getting sent to you as well, so you'll have this compatibility matrix in the deck when it gets sent out. There are some Hyper-V and Azure local limitations, so you won't have the ability to do your virtual lab, or as we call them, data lab testings. Malware scanning is a little limited here, but there is malware flag on the restore point detection. So if your restore points were flagged as having malware from the VDR, your recovery plans will be able to see that and detect it. And you're unable to run ingest scripts, and it is not available for replicas. And then this dives a little bit more deeper into some of those limitations, but also some of the robust cross-compatibility that we have here on this matrix here. So you can see the replica plans, CDP plans, and their availability for VMware, but not Hyper-V. But we can restore from backup plans on both, for example, as well as those malware flag checks, Yara scanning for both, readiness checks, and post-recovery validation on both. And then on the right side here, we have that from and to column again. So vSphere to Hyper-V to Azure, and the agent and your Hyper-V, which can go to Hyper-V and to Azure, just to Hyper-V, but your agents can go vSphere, Azure. In this slide here, we're going to dive a little bit into some of the offline malware scanning here. So if we come down to our recovery plans here, we can click on one of these and go to manage, and under scheduling, we can enable our malware detection here, and we can tell it to run once or weekly, what days we want to. So you can schedule these tasks to run and even check for malware here. And then we're going to flip on this antivirus scan. And we're going to tell it how many restore points we want to check back on. We can also use our Yara rules here that we mentioned previously. Sorry, a moment. If we right click here again, we can hit scan. You can see here that we have a verified state up at the top there. And we can select our Yara rules. I'm going to disable the Yara rules for this portion here. And then the restore points here, we can say our most restore point before a certain date. And then it's running here, as we can see. So we're going to go into the details here. So you can see that these are queued. These are some of the steps here, which we'll touch on a little bit more in detail on the demo portion. You can see here we have a lot of good success so far. Right now it's starting to scan the C drive. And we have another success down there for the volume. And a success on the malware scan. It's a very powerful functionality here in Recovery Orchestrator to do an on-demand malware detection check on our restore points. Moving on. Recovery documentation. So this is also something we're going to touch on in the demo in a moment here. This is very powerful stuff here. we're able to run reports and automatically generate reports as soon as we create a plan, as well as audit our plans. Data lab tests that we do will generate reports as well. So there's a whole host of dynamic documentation that we're able to provide through Recovery Orchestrator to really give you that deeper look into your environment, both from the perspective of a backup administrator, but as we'll see later, also for stakeholders and audits. And this here is an example of one of the audit reports that we'll be looking at later. This you can set up to run monthly, and it has a summary page that's going to show everything across the whole month, everything that's happened on that plan. So every activity is recorded, and we have the legend here in the bottom middle of the screen. If a plan was halted, if malware was detected, if the plan ran and had warnings, and if there was RTPO failures as well. I'm going to go ahead and move over into the demo portion here. So this is my Veeam backup and recovery and Veeam Recovery Orchestrator server here. So I'd like to just start off with backup and replication here. As we can see, we have a number of jobs here, and we'll keep an eye on these names here because we're going to see these in vRow in a moment because they're going to get pulled in automatically via mechanism in Veeam 1. So over here is our dashboard for Veeam Recovery Orchestrator. If I come over to our settings here, we can see kind of some of the backend and some of the stuff that Jason was talking about earlier. So under our infrastructure here, we can see that we have our VBR server here. We have our VMware hosts as well. And we also have our recovery locations. So just as the name implies, these are going to be locations that are designated for restores to go to for things like backups. Whereas, a replica is going to spin up wherever the replica resides. But for our backup restores, we want to specify a location. So we build those locations out here. And then under inventory access here, we can see our groups. And if you notice, these names here are looking familiar because they're getting pulled in from that VBR server. So we have groups that contain our VMs from what's being protected in VBR, so that when we go to create jobs or edit jobs, we're able to select those. So if I come down here to recovery plan, we're going to say add a new plan. And there's a few different types here. So we can do, cloud workloads here. So we can recover VMs from vSphere or agents into Azure. We can do restores from VMs from agent backups to vSphere or Hyper-V, replicas, and storage failovers. So for this example, we're just going to do a restore. And for our type here, we're going to select a VMware vSphere. And we can give this plan a name. And so for this example, we'll say test. And then we can enter in contact details as well. So we can say, Donnie is going to be our contact. And that would be his email in this example, so that when something happens with this plan or it runs, that's the contact who's going to be informed. We're also going to specify an RPO and an RTO. And this is going to kind of be that golden rule that the plan is going to hold itself to. So when we start running audit checks and other things like that, this is effectively what it's checking against to make sure that RPOs and RTOs are met. And then for our recovery location, as we saw earlier, we are going to select the DR site here that we have set up for vSphere. And then our reporting, you can create different templates. We're just going to go with the default template here. And then the summary page is just going to give you a summary of everything that we did. Now, when I click finish here, it's going to ask us to jump in and use the plan editor. I'm just going to say no for this portion here because I'm going to jump into a pre-created plan. And show everything in there. So we're going to use this billing app to VMware plan. So if I come down here, I can go to manage, and then I can go to edit. And in here, I can see I have pre-planned steps, post-planned steps, and I see my group of VMs, which would be added through here. As you can see, we have our different groups. So our billing group has already been added in this example. And we have a lot of granularity here because I can add individual steps to these VMs, or I can add a step globally to the whole group for this plan. And so in this example, I'm going to add, sorry, I'm going to go to group options and show here that we can actually restore the VMs with their original VM tags. We can also do reprotect group, which would allow it to choose a template to back these up once they've been restored so that they continue to stay protected, which is a very powerful thing because that's a question that I would always get asked a lot is, okay, now my things are restored, how do I continue to protect them in case I have to run them for a while? So highlighting the group here, if I go to step editor, I have all of my steps here that have been selected. So it's going to restore the VM, which is useful. And then we're also going to do a heartbeat check just to make sure that it can reach the OS and validate that, okay, the VM has been powered on and restored. Is it actually there? Is it in the OS? So I'm going to come here and I'm going to add, and I'm going to do a network check because I want it to be able to ping and make sure that I have some network connectivity. And if I click on any of these, I can go to step parameters and you have more granularity. So here I could put critical step if I wanted to that says, hey, this is critical. Maybe I want to halt the plan if I consider this to be critical. So the whole plan will stop, but we're going to leave that off for now. You can see here, you can set timeout as well as retries. So now if I hit save here, you'll see that it adds that network check to all of those VMs inside of the group. So I'll just say save plan here. Back. And then what we will do is we will go to our schedule. And so under the schedule, just as the name implies, we can publish audit reports, on the first day of the month here at 8 a.m. We can also perform readiness checks regularly. And this is also where we can schedule malware detection here, which we touched on a little bit on the on-demand side of things. But I can configure the schedule here, just like we went over before. Up here. And then I can also schedule a plan execution. So say I want this plan to run regularly and generate those reports, I can do so. So for this push, I'm going to cancel. So the next thing to do is a readiness check. Come down here, I can run check. And this is going to tell us if the plan is ready to go and if it's able to perform the steps in our plan. Here we go. Sorry about that. It's in use here. All right, so we had a fail to check and we got some errors there. So what I can do is I can come down here and I can go to reporting and I can see here my report failed. So I don't see a readiness check there. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to run a readiness check. It doesn't seem to want to cooperate here for some reason. So let's try on this one here on our engineering app. Since we saw that that one already completed successfully. So you'll get something like this when it's validated and passed its checks. And we'll continue to use this plan here as an example. But another thing that we can do here, sorry. So another thing that we can do here is come to test. So we'll try to run a test here on our billing apps to VMware. And we can say we're going to go to our DR site that we had set up, and under our data lab, we could select our data lab that we have created here. And we'll just do a quick test here. And then we're going to power them off immediately because we're just testing. And we can even enable our malware flag checks, antivirus scanning if we would like to as well. So we're just going to run test here.
And while Barney's getting that to run here, I just want to let everyone know, if you have questions, please, throw them into the Q&A so that we can get those answered.
Thanks, Jason. Just waiting for this test here to run through.
And we can get a little bit more information here as well if we go to that left-hand side on the data labs there on the nav. And you can see that that's starting. If you click into that, we're going to get that more granular information about what we're actually doing with that virtual lab, as well as what's happening with that recovery plan that he's testing out here.
So if we click on here, thank you, Jason. We can see that we've gotten up to preparing our data lab here. And we're now waiting for these billing app to VMware pre-checks to come through. And so while that's running, we can actually kind of skip ahead here, like those cooking shows. But if we come to reporting here, what we can do is I can actually filter this by data lab tests. And we can see here there's some previous tests here that have run successfully, some that have been halted. So if I click on this billing apps to VMware, it'll download a PDF here. And I can open this up. So this is a restore plan data test summary report. I come over here down to the summary here. We can see everything that executed on the plan. We can see that the pre-plan steps were successful, the VMs were successful, and our post-plan steps were successful. And if you notice, these are all hyperlinks as well. So we can click on these and get brought down, and then we can continue to drill down into each single one. So here we can see billing one here. We can see our recovery test, our restore was successful, the heartbeat was successful. It also obviously checks beforehand that there's available licensing so that we know that everything's going to be able to come up without any problems. Take a look at some of these other reports as well. So there is also our readiness check reports that we were trying to run earlier. So let's filter these out by success, or even warnings. We'll do one of these ones with a warning and show how that's useful to us. So on this readiness check report here, we'll go back down to summary, and we can see that certain things weren't ready, certain things had a warning. So we'll click on this, and we'll see that there are warning results for each of these. And so if we click on one of the names, we can see that it wasn't able to restore. So it just gives you that granularity so that you can dig in and kind of problem solve if something doesn't run successfully. Also execution reports. We can see here, we click on this one. Oh, couldn't download. My lab environment clearly needs some work. And then down here, a similar type of breakdown. You know, it met its RPO. There weren't any RPO failures. And it gives us our timing on RTOs as well. So this is a great check to be able to kind of give to your teams or the people above you, you know, maybe that corporate level or auditors that says, hey, we are going to be able to meet our RTOs and our RPOs using Veeam Recovery Orchestrator and using the plans that we have set up and configured. And this report validates that. So it's a very powerful tool, again, for validation. I'd also like to check out the audits. So the audit reports are going to generate and be able to show you everything that's happened to a plan, any changes that have been made. And so these are really great for RTPO, showing errors. So we'll come down here, we'll go to summary. So again, just like we saw on that slide deck here, you know, if it's running every day, we can see here that the readiness checks had passed recently. You know, there was a warning here, there was a RTPO violation here. So it gives you that kind of snapshot of how this restore plan is functioning and operating. So you know, okay, things have been going good here, but if we start to see warnings and errors, then you can obviously surmise, okay, if something were to really happen and we had to run this plan, we might run into issues. So it's a great way to be proactive with all of that and inside of your environment. And then our readiness check here, we'll do one for a success. Check one of the CDP. So this one is for our CDP replicas here. So we can see here that the execution details, what's going on inside of the plan, our SLAs and RPOs. We can see ready, ready, ready. Lots of good green there. It's meeting its RPO. Didn't have any RPO failures. It's within its SLA. So these are, again, reports that you can generate to show yourself and others that things are configured correctly and that the environment is being protected properly. So to close out the demo, we're just going to come back to the dashboard here. Dashboard is just what it sounds like. It gives you a high-level view of everything that's going on. So we can see here that in this example in the lab, you know, we have a verified plan. We have a number that are not yet verified, and we have a few that needs verifications. So these are ones that haven't been checked yet, and these are ones that have failed and need to get verified. And then also we have our testing plan results here. So we have one that had halted and failed. And then as you can see here, high-level overviews of RPOs and RTOs. And then you can click into these plans and drill down. So again, I can come in here, I can see, okay, there was an error. Where were my errors? And it wasn't able to process this. So the restore point didn't meet our desired RPO in this example. And in this example here too, it wasn't in a ready state, so it was disconnected. So as you can see, again, just a very high level overview of some of the powerful options that you have inside of Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, including all those plans and reports that we can run to really show yourself again and others inside of your organization that things are, you know, kind of passing the smell test. So you know that, you know, if push comes to shove and you have to run one of these plans, if you have to perform recovery inside of your environment, you kind of know exactly what's going to happen, and you have the documentation not only to back it up, but also to run through. So you know exactly what's going to happen with your plans before they even have to kick off. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And so if you want to get more involved in our community, we definitely encourage you to go to community.veeam.com. You can join our community hub. We have the VRO Heroes Den, which is a great resource and forum of other Veeam users using Veeam Recovery Orchestrator, helping each other out, answering questions, posting things that they've used it for. There's also a lot of really great, we call them Veeam user groups or VUGs that you can join up. You can find a local VUG in your area. We have them in the US as well as Canada. There's some really great ones. There's great ones out in London, all over the world, really. And some of those communities are extremely active. So the community here is really a great place to not only get started, but also just to kind of continue your Veeam journey with keeping up with all of the new things and features that are coming out. Also, if you're ever looking to take your VMCE, there's a lot of great resources on the community hub there for VMCE. You'll see Shane around there on the forums posting practice quizzes and practice exam questions to help you get ready and sharpened for that.
Yeah, great. Great, Barney. Yeah, I think we could definitely end it off there. I mean, we do have a little bit of time left. So, a lot of great material was covered. If there's any additional questions, feel free to get them in there now. We've got your information as well, so we can get you some feedback on obviously all of the data that we covered, the slides, like I mentioned, additional questions. But I appreciate everyone joining the call with us today, joining the webinar, and reviewing Veeam Recovery Orchestrator and all of its features. But I think with that, we'll end it off, and everyone have a great day.